welcome back to the Red Dice Diaries, and as you'll notice there's a slight change of scenery in this video since I've moved downstairs. But never mind that, we're here to talk about GM tips, and in this I'm talking about creating a more textured and more detailed description of locations, items and NPCs to engage your player characters more and draw them more into the game. Now, you might ask, how important are descriptions in a game? Well, in real life, we rely on a multitude of sensory input to create the world around us. And I've talked in other places about how you can bring other sensory input, such as sense of hearing, smell, taste, touch, etc., into your descriptions. But we shouldn't overlook the importance of the visual element of descriptions. For most of us in the real world, the visual element, the visual spectrum, forms a large part of our worldview. And likewise, it would be the same for your player characters. However, your players are sat around in a room, they don't have this sensory input from this imaginary world that you're trying to create. They are reliant on yourself as the GM to build this picture in their mind, to create this tapestry of the world that you're attempting to portray for them. And the visual spectrum is a large part of that. However, some people can struggle with creating evocative descriptions, and there's no shame in that. Everyone's mind works differently. You may find it quite easy to picture in your mind what you want to describe to your players, but you may find difficulty conveying that since you can't really just show them a picture. Most GMs would rely on a certain amount of verbal description to describe these scenes or elements of their campaign. There are a few things you can do to improve your descriptive power though. What I would suggest you do, if you have problems in describing things like this, is find a picture of the element that you want to describe, whether it be an old temple, another location, an NPC, an item, whatever it may happen to be. Find a picture before the session, and there are numerous places you can look for pictures. A couple of my favorites are Google image search, and as Jenny, the rogue GM, mentioned in one of her videos recently, DeviantArt, which is a great place to find all manner of paintings, drawings, etc. And it comes with a fairly nifty search box, so you can spend ages looking through there until you find a picture that's roughly what you want. Once you've got your picture, I suggest you look at it and consider where the player characters are going to enter this scene, and then following what their view might be through the picture, write down a few elements that you intend to pick out in your description. And you can note them down on a piece of paper, whether an index card, as I'm fond of talking about, or, as is the case for my notes for this video, you could write them on a handy napkin that you happen to have lying about. Whatever you choose to write them on, that's up to you. And once you've got these elements, you can use them to build an evocative description for your players. So, as an example of this, I'm going to look at the picture called Temple Ruins of DeviantArt by Arisuon Par. Apologies if I've not got the name right. And I'll give you a few seconds to look at that. Okay, so looking at this picture, if I was going to present this as a scene to my players, what I'd do is, let's assume that the players are going to be starting off in the position of the man with the dog holding the staff in the picture. Looking at it from his point of view, I've picked out a few things that I've noted down. These include the twisted tree to the left of him, the bridge stretching over the fairly murky looking river that has 4 figures standing on top of it, the steps carved into the cliff, and the crumbled ruins of the temple at the top. Now, I might build these into a description in this manner. So I might say to my players, as you approach the edge of the rocky outcropping, a gnarled, twisted tree rises from the ground, like a hand reaching out towards the old stone bridge that travels across the muddy, murky river. 4 indistinct figures stand on the bridge, but from this distance you can't make out whether they are the enemy soldiers or whether they are simple monks making their pilgrimage to the ruined temple. However, they appear to be making their way towards the steep, jagged stone cliff on the other side of the river. You can see that there are stone steps hewn into the rock of the cliff face, spiraling upwards towards the crumbling ancient remnants of the temple that squats atop the cliff. And that's how I might describe that scene. That's only one way of describing it, and I've mainly focused on the visual elements there. I could have made more of other sensory input, describing the sliminess of the rocks as they have been affected by the river flowing past, describing a couple of stones falling into the river, or making more of the manner in which the people walked across. That's not even starting describing the weather or other atmospheric conditions. But since this video is focused mainly on the visual element, that's mainly what I focused on in that description. And that's a perfectly serviceable description. What I don't want to do is fall into the trap of spending an hour of describing stuff and having the players sat there drumming their fingers, getting bored, waiting until they can actually do something, until they eventually start talking about something else, dropping out of character with boredom, whatever. What I want to do is present a framework of a description with a few evocative details in it so that they can then crack on with getting on with whatever the mission may happen to be within the game. And if they want to ask for more details about specific elements of the session, obviously I've got the details there so I can provide it. For example, if I was going to describe that, bringing in a few more details from other senses, I might say, as you approach the rocky outcropping, which is slick with the spray of the muddy river that flows turgidly past it, a gnarled, blackened tree stretches upwards into the sky like a hand reaching out towards the crumbling old bridge that stretches across the river. 4 figures make their way solemnly towards the edge of the bridge, although at this distance you cannot tell if they are the enemy's troops or monks attending some form of pilgrimage. What sort of holy man would attend a pilgrimage in the squat, crumbling remnants of the old, desecrated temple that lies across the top of the cliff on the other side of the bridge? You have no idea though, but you can see they are making their way towards the stone steps roughly hewn into the granite of the cliff that rises up into the sky, containing the ruined temple atop it. And that's another way of describing it, and it's brought in a few additional elements. But what I suggest you do is, when you've got your elements written down and you've got your little bits of description, have a look through them, and if you think that they maybe sound a little bit samey, or they're not as evocative as you think, see whether you can bring in some other non-visual elements to improve them, or perhaps if you think it's just a matter of you've used a lot of the same words, or maybe the description doesn't sound exactly right or the way you want it to sound, have a look online at maybe an online thesaurus or an online dictionary, and you should be able to find plenty of alternate words there which mean the same thing but are slightly different in the way they are spoken, or they have a slightly different rhythm to them when used in a sentence, and try a couple of them out. Try speaking the description out loud with a few of these different words in them, and you may find something you like even more than your original word, or you may decide that actually your original description was perfectly fine and go ahead with that. So that's my suggestions for improving your descriptions and the visual element of your descriptions. If you've enjoyed this video, please click on like and subscribe to the channel. If you have any comments about this, please leave them in the box below or comment on the Google Plus links. I'm not saying that this video is exhaustive by any means, so if you've got any other suggestions for how people could improve their descriptions, please leave them down below, since after all, any suggestions we can get to help people who are maybe struggling with this sort of thing will help create more evocative games, will help draw more players in, will help get players more involved and more invested in games, and will help everyone have more fun, and that's what we're all here for at the end of the day. So until I see you in the next video, thank you very much for watching and very much for listening.